With that, I guess I will introduce Scott Witkoff.
I'm actually just glad all of you showed up.
Oh, me too.
Because, no, I mean, let's be honest, right? After the last election, what the hell do we do now? Right? We knocked on all the doors. We got people out to vote, by and large. But here's a question. Why were more people motivated to turn out for Republicans than for Democrats? Right? We own every issue. Right? Would anybody disagree that the progressive Democrats own every issue? That every issue that we represent is in people's best interests? Labor, right? Education, healthcare, women's health rights, right? Economy, right? What has austerity done to this state and nation? So why do people again and again, why do we struggle? And then every election we go, geez, we just got to knock on more doors. You know, or Mark Pocan's press release when he was named vice chair of the Progressive Caucus in Washington, saying we need to make sure that we communicate the issues better. If people just understood our stand on the issues, we'll win elections. How long have we been saying that? Long time, right? There's a reason, and to Craig's point, it's not Craig's inability to communicate to people about how important this is, especially for progressives. What's harder is to understand why, when we get into this, why we don't do it. And there's a reason why we don't do it. It's because a lot of us went to school and we paid attention. And we learned things during our lives. And what did we learn about thought? Well, I learned the 17th century view of thought. I think, therefore I am. Right? The Age of Enlightenment. Every one of us learned Enlightenment reason, which means I think, therefore I am. Right? That reason and thought and language fit the world one way. Right? So if I say something to you guys in labor about the economy, you're going to understand it the same way as Scott Walker understands it. That's Enlightenment reason's view of the mind. 100% false. Language is not neutral. Words are not neutral. Words mean things in the context of how they're used and frames. So we're going to talk about that first today. Because you need to understand how your mind works, and how other people's minds work before you can communicate effectively. So that's number one. Second thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the differing views of democracy based on the way people view the world. And there's two. There's conservative and progressive. So you have to understand the different views of democracy in order to communicate your view effectively. Then we're going to take a break, and then we're going to dig into the election, into the governor's race. And based on what you learned in the first half, well, the first part won't be half, it'll be less than half. Give you a look at the gubernatorial campaigns and the critical mistakes that were made in terms of messaging, and how that affected every other race in the state, every other Democratic race in the state. It really gave progressive Dems no shot. And then we're going to have a little participation area where I'm going to ask you what your message would be for the next campaign based on what you've learned, the mistakes made, and see if you can get an idea formulating about what a unifying message is. Because that's what we need. The Republicans have a unifying message. 100%. And they've been working on it for 50 years. Progressives are way behind. And this is not a partisan issue. I talk to Republicans about this all the time, and they get it. And there are things that Republicans are progressive on. Education, the environment, right? I know a lot of Republicans who love to go hunting, and they're progressive on the environment. They're progressive on education and public schools, which means they can be progressive on other things. So there's hope. There is. There really is. You know, my family.
Money out of politics.
Yeah, my family lives in Brookfield. They're super conservative. My dad still listens to Charlie Sykes every day. But you know what? He agreed with what Barack Obama just did on immigration. Surprise, surprise. He thought it was a good idea. He said, you know what? Then Congress should do something. Is what my dad said. And he said, look, those people are families. And they're in communities. They should pay their taxes to invest in the community just like all of us. They should be able to send their kids to school and have the opportunities we all do. He gets that. That's a progressive point of view that my dad, who listens to Charlie Sykes every day, understands. So there's hope. So we get started. We did this 100 years ago as progressives. Right? That guy in the middle, Robert M. La Follette, they fought the robber barons who were doing the same thing 100 years ago and changed the course of political history. So now here we are again. We need to understand how we got here in order to look at the scope of the problem. So this started 1968, the Nixon campaign. Republicans had a huge problem. Conservatives, more specifically. Okay? What were the problems? Vietnam War protests. All those liberal academics, hippies, burning flags.
Us.
Yeah. Right? Women burning bras all over the country.
Never happened.
The women's lib movement. Right? The civil rights movement. Okay? Things were really bad for conservatives in 1968. And they needed a strategy. And the Nixon campaign came up with that strategy. What was it? They started the conservative populist movement. And what is happening today is a result of conservative populism. And they coined the term liberal elite. Richard Nixon was going to be the law and order president. He was going to put all those hippies, all those liberal academics, all those women who were rebelling against what? American values, family values. He was going to be a law and order president and bring all those people into line. He coined the term liberal elite. Created a metaphor. There's really no such thing as liberal elite. It's a metaphor.
Yeah.
Right? All those Birkenstock wearing, academic, looking down their nose at you, they don't understand what the working man goes through. Very powerful. And it persists to this day. That was step one. Has anybody ever heard of the Lewis Powell memo?
Oh yeah.
1971. Lewis Powell was Richard Nixon's first Supreme Court nominee. He wrote a memo to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. The memo said, the American free enterprise system is under attack, and that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce members need to put as much money and resources to basically what Richard Nixon said, to controlling the liberal elite, start taking back academia, put together think tanks, well-funded think tanks, to promote free enterprise, start judicial training sessions. Do you guys have any idea that conservatives hold judicial training sessions all over the country? And you know what they teach judges? How to interpret the law to favor free enterprise. That started in 1971. This was not based on an issue. That's what I want to get to. It was based on the values of free enterprise, personal liberty. What conservatives started calling traditional American values. Okay, and what does this have the effect of doing on a national scale? Changes common sense. Two years later, as a result of the Powell memo, the Heritage Foundation is founded. Any of you been to Washington, D.C. and seen where the Heritage Foundation is located?
Yep.
2nd Avenue Northeast in Massachusetts, about 4 blocks from the U.S. Capitol. Here's the Heritage Foundation's mission. Promote conservative public policies based on the principles, translation values, free enterprise, limited government, individual freedom, traditional American values, and strong defense. None of those are issues. Strong defense is kind of, but it's a protection. It's a protection frame. Those are all values. It's nothing to do with issues. In fact, it speaks to every issue. So the Heritage Foundation gets millions and millions of dollars every year to do whatever they want to promote free enterprise. So we're in 1973. 6 years later, this is based in Virginia. It's called the Leadership Institute. They train thousands and thousands of young conservatives every year. That is a graduating class from what they call the Youth Leadership Conference. They're held all over the country. In fact, in early January, there's one here in Milwaukee. It's 2 days, all day, all night, meals included, $15. You think somebody's underwriting that? They hold it all over the country. They hold it online. They have resources. In fact, get out of this. Here is the website, if I can get over to, all right, here's the website for the Leadership Institute. I don't know if you can see, you have Youth Leadership School, Arlington, Virginia, November 21st to 23rd. Campaign Management School. Wednesday Wake Up Club Breakfasts. Advanced Debate Workshop. Women's Leadership Training. Public Relations School Advanced. Conservative Career Workshop. Real Activism on Campus. There's January 10th and 11th, Youth Leadership School in Milwaukee. Written Communication Workshop, Writing Your Campaign Plan, March for Life, Training and Lodging Package. This targets kids in high school and college. Last year they trained 15,000 conservatives. So, just to give you an idea of what we're up against and how long this has been going on. They have a reception, they have dinners, they have a dance. It's crazy. Here's what's important. They also manage a speakers bureau. Right? George Lakoff has had the experience of, knowing people who book these things, and they have lists of conservative trained leaders on every issue area who are available to go on local, statewide, national talk shows and communicate the message. And they run a booking agency. So they'll call WTMJ and say, oh, hey, you're doing a piece on voucher schools? Look, we got so-and-so from wherever, and they book them. So that's 1979 that's been going on. 1985, Grover Norquist starts Americans for Tax Reform for Ronald Reagan. The other thing he did, which was more important, the ATR, was in 1993 he started a Wednesday morning meeting in Washington, D.C. It's from 9 o'clock to noon every Wednesday morning in a restaurant near the Capitol. And what they did was, the first hour was just a meet and greet. They'd have coffee, donuts, stuff like that. Meet the best and brightest in the conservative world. Second hour, they would do a debate. So whenever they had an issue where conservatives didn't have consensus, and there are, clearly, they have a debate time. And Norquist would pick the people who were the best at each topic. And they would have an hour of debate, heated debate. They would take questions from the audience, and at a point where they would reach consensus, he would stop the debate and he would restate the conservative position, right? They would take that, send it off to the Leadership Institute and the Heritage Foundation and other think tanks, and say, look, here is our position on this. Create the message and get it out there. And within a week, it'd be all over the country. And these meetings are still happening. They happen in every state in the nation. The one here is in the Country Inn, out on I-94, every Wednesday morning, 9 o'clock. You don't get in unless you have an invitation. They're all over the United States, every state in the nation, and 12 countries around the world. And Norquist gets regular check-ins from every group. Right? So why is conservative economic policies so prevalent in Europe? It's because these meetings are being held all over the world, promoting the conservative frame of economics. And what does that do? It's, since 1993, it's solidified the machine. See, now you're going, we're screwed. We're so screwed. What you're going to learn today is what conservatives have known and put into practice for years. Number one, it's how your brains actually work. Right? And to the point of why what you learn matters early on in life, first of all, you lose half of your neural circuitry before you're 4 years old. So your brain is physically structured before you're 4 years old. So why is early childhood education so important? But more importantly, what you learn and how you learn it matters. Because conservatives go to school and what do they study? Business, marketing. What do you learn in business and marketing? This. What do progressives go to college for? Political science, philosophy, liberal arts, Descartes, Hippocrates, Plato. I think therefore I am.
Women's studies.
Women's studies, right? All that, rational thought is what people learn. So we're going to learn how your brains actually work based on the most recent cognitive neuroscience. You're also going to learn what conservatives know and practice with great success, obviously. Again, why progressives know this yet fail to practice it to our demise? I just told you, we all think that the rational actor model fits the world. It doesn't. The difference between the two moral worldviews, how to avoid mistakes, and then most importantly, how to change the frame of critical issues. That's what's important, because by changing the frame, you can change public discourse. And that's what we need to do. You can knock on all the doors you want, but if everybody is still in the same conservative frame globally, it doesn't mean a thing, because they won't even hear a word you say. So first of all, two things. Before I go to the next, don't think of an elephant. Seriously. And there's a reason why Lakoff wrote a book that's titled that. When I say don't think of an elephant, what did you do?
I saw an elephant.
Not even saw an elephant, but whatever context you think an elephant belongs in. Some of you at the circus, a zoo, the savannah of Africa, right? Probably all of you thought of the elephant, but each of you probably had a different physical experience in your mind in where that elephant was and what it was doing. And that is physically present in your brain. It's not floating out there in the air. It's physically there, and it's based on your life experience and all your own personal biases. That's really important. So if you think about issues you care about, I'm just going to put the images up there. So the sum of all those images probably evokes strong emotional reaction with all of them. Now, why does that matter? Because every policy that you care about is based on a moral system. And that system is unconscious. It has to be. Why? Because you think with your brain. You have no choice. You can't think with the air, you can't think with your arm, you think with your brain. Your brain evolved to run a body. Therefore, your brain performs thousands and thousands of complex circuitry activations, neural impulses every second. And if you understood, if you were consciously able to access that moral system, you wouldn't be able to do anything else. Because it's so deeply embedded. Right? So your brain has to run these things unconsciously. Now, why does that matter to politics? Because that unconscious system needs to be made conscious if you're to change public discourse. Why? Again, if that moral system is unconscious and you need to make it conscious in your communications, it's important because every issue has a unified moral frame. We'll get to framing in a second. So each of those issues that you looked at, right, there was some basic value that you thought of, which is unconscious, and it unifies each of those issues. So you need to make that conscious and communicate it all the time. That's why conservatives win. Every issue they have can be boiled down to two things: personal liberty and small government. What's the unifying progressive frame?
Fairness.
There isn't one. It's called, there's a term for it, it's called hypocognition. Not hypocognition. Which means that there's been such an absence of activating that neural circuitry in the larger global, not in individuals, but collectively, that it doesn't exist anymore. The language, metaphors. I was working with Steve Doyle back a ways, and he said, I don't want to know all this, just give me a bumper sticker slogan. Seriously. And a lot of candidates feel that way. They don't want to know this. Just give me a bumper sticker. And I said, a bumper sticker will work because of hypocognition. A bumper sticker has to elicit a deep emotional tie to some really core value and belief. Progressives don't have that. There's a reason why Scott Walker's bumper sticker that says "Believe in Wisconsin" is so effective. Because it elicits an unconscious, emotional, and moral reaction in people. Progressives don't have that. We need to build it. Oh, yeah.
Can you repeat what the conservative frame is? Small government and what?
Personal liberty.
Personal liberty.
Yep.
That one didn't make sense to me.
So today we begin learning how to think and communicate our moral system effectively and repeatedly. It doesn't mean you have to abandon your issues. It just means that you put your issue in the frame of the more important moral system. So the current methods are really ineffective, right? If people just knew the facts. If people just knew how big the deficit was, there's no way they're going to vote for Scott Walker. Everybody knows how big the deficit is. Yet he still won. Why? Because people vote morals and values. People vote for moral leadership. If you think for 1 minute that conservatives don't think that they're moral, you're very wrong. Conservatives are acting morally in their system.
Can I ask though, is it related with religion?
Yes.
Okay.
Religion, in fact, religion translates directly to framing. And you'll see that when we get to the different worldviews. The other thing is you always hear this, just tell a story. Tell a narrative. With so-and-so, the progressive is the hero and the conservative is the villain, and tell a compelling story. Well, guess what? You can still tell that narrative in the conservative frame, which you'll see. You can evoke deeply embodied conservative values in a story where the progressive is the hero. Mary Burke did that. Mary Burke's whole story about her success as a private job creator, right? That evoked the conservative frame. Because of how this framing works, it changes common sense on a global scale. We'll get to that. But what's important, what you said about the whole hero narrative thing, is that the people that put that together are really smart people. But they're sociologists, economists, linguists. But they don't pay attention to the cognitive sciences. They don't pay attention to neuroscience and how the brain works. So they're bought into everything is created in the current, the dominant language of the day, which is conservative. I hate to tell you, we live in a world that is dominated by conservative language, conservative ideas, and metaphor. And metaphor is incredibly powerful. Everything we understand about the world is metaphorical. Do you know that? Everything. Up is good, down is bad. Right. Warmth. If I say that you're a warm person, it means you're a good person. If I say you're cold. And all those metaphors are based on your experience even when you were first born. Right? The warmth metaphor, a warm person, is when you were held as a child, you felt warm, safe. If you were left out, abandoned, you're cold, you were cold. And all these things are physical. So now we talk about frames. You hear it all the time. Not everybody understands what a frame actually is. You know, you hear a lot of it. You have the Frameworks Institute. It does a lot of work here in the state. They don't understand what a frame is. They don't, and it's critically important. Framing is thinking. Remember I said you think with your brain, you have no choice? Therefore, every time you think, you frame. You have no choice. Right? Library. What comes into your head when you have library? A librarian, books, reading, maybe a meeting, right? That's a frame. Hospital. Kitchen. Restaurant. Right? Those are all frames. They activate ideas and metaphors that are physically present in your brain. It's critically important because it happens unconsciously also. You know, if I say truck stop, you don't consciously know what your brain is going to pull up when I say truck stop. You have no conscious control over that. That's why don't think of an elephant is so important. You have no control over it. You think of an elephant. It's neural circuitry in your brain that gets developed, right? And there's neural binding to other regions of your mind that connect with thought and emotion. It's all connected. We used to think there was a part of the brain that was rational thought, part of the brain that controlled emotion, and that the two were separate. No, they're connected. They're neurally bound based on the physical experiences of your life. Which is really cool because it means you're connected with the rest of the world. You're physically connected with the rest of the world. The world is not separate from you. You are part of the world. It's kind of a cool concept. Thought is physical. Frames are neural circuits in our brains. Okay, so think of a neural circuit in your brain as a path through the woods. The ones that are used the most are the ones that are activated most often. It's your go-to circuitry because it happens so fast, right? Which means the ones that are exercised the most are the paths that are most clear. So, to use a metaphor, the conservative frame right now is I-94. The progressive frame is like rural Route 6. So which one do you think your brain's going to go to most? The conservative. You have no choice. So when we talk about framing an issue, it means that we evoke the physical circuit for that frame, progressive or conservative, in your brain. Right? So like when I said, don't think of an elephant, right? It evoked the neural circuitry for elephant and everything that cascades from it. Some of you may have even thought of a Republican because of the Republican image of elephant, right? Some maybe thought of, that's because there's a neural binding from the concept of elephant, the frame, to Republican that's been developed in your brain. It's that simple. Kind of cool, huh? So framing is thinking. I said it before, Descartes was wrong. Thought is not rational. We cannot think without emotion. So for all the men, and when I learned this, I thought, oh, I'm in trouble. Oh, those emotional women. Right? Your conservatives say that all the time. They're just acting emotional. Guess what? You cannot think without emotion. And this was discovered back in the 90s in Italy. In Parma, Italy, they were doing experiments, neural experiments on macaque monkeys, where they had the monkeys hooked up to the neural processor with the computer, and they would check the monkey's neurological reaction to things that they did. When a monkey ate a banana, the pleasure center of their brain was activated, the machine would go tick, 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 and they would chart the data. Well, one day there was a lab assistant. This is a true story. This is documented. It was research papers been written on it. When one of the lab assistants left the lab, came back with her lunch, was eating her lunch, heard the machine go tick, 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 and looked at the monkey, none of the monkeys were doing anything. They were watching her eat. They had discovered mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are what evolved in our brains that make us all hardwired for empathy. So, watching somebody do an activity, your brain physically responds the same as you performing that activity yourself. So think about, again, how that connects you with the outside world. Right? If you watch somebody, hit their hand with a hammer, you experience the same thing physically in your brain as them experiencing that pain. The same regions of the brain fire. That's why we love watching little kids open presents. That's why we feel bad when we see a tortured animal on TV. It's physical. And we're all hardwired for empathy. And it requires emotion. If the region of your brain that is part of the processing of emotion with the neural binding, if it's damaged, you can't make any decisions for your life. They see that in stroke victims. You can't make any decision because you have no relation empathetically with what the consequence of that decision would be. Frame use is mostly unconscious. 98% is the best estimate. So 98% of what you think is unconscious. And again, it has to be. It has to be that way. Okay? Well, because rationality is linear. Your brain works in parallel. So if you're an engineer, think of that in terms of wiring. Okay? Your brain is, your rational thought is a single linear line. Your brain works in hundreds of thousands of parallel circuits. So without even realizing it, we reinforce and repeat conservative messaging all the time. And that's called negation. Don't think of an elephant. Here's some examples. Scott Walker has not even created half of the jobs he promised. You're going to see that reinforces the conservative frame in a huge way. The entire, and here's the thing, when you activate the frame, when you talk about private sector job creation, activating the conservative frame, metaphorically, it actually activates the entire frame. It's called a neural cascade. right? Just like the elephant, you didn't just think of the elephant. You thought globally about elephant. You thought of all different contexts of elephant and activities, right? So when you activate the frame at all, you activate the entire frame. And it happens unconsciously. You don't think of it, you don't control it, it happens. And it exercises that neural circuitry. That's from the DPW website. Here's a simpler example. Richard Nixon got up and said, I am not a crook. Everybody thought of him as a crook. So how is it critical? Every message has a frame. So when you think, you frame. So when you message, you get people to think. Therefore, that message is understood by people in the larger context of the frame. It has to be that way. Again, it's how your brain works. The frame defines the moral worldview and certitude that you are talking about, that you are evoking. So the frame, if I say, I'm going to fill up my coffee cup, right? That evokes the frame of filling the cup, which in me unconsciously gives me a good feeling because my cup is going to be more full. That's metaphorical. Think of frames as like boxes, just like a metaphorical. Our language is all understood in terms of containers. Like the language and the words we use and sentences are understood metaphorically in terms of a container. Almost everything we think of is in terms of a direction or a place or a state of existence within a certain experience, right? So those messages exist within that metaphorical frame. And we'll get to the metaphor part of it soon. This is why this is so important, because people vote and respond to morals. People do not respond to issues. People do not respond to a laundry list of issues. And if you're in politics and if you don't get that, you're in the wrong business. More people vote on moral frames and issues. We know this from research. Conservatives know it. That's why they never talk about specific issues without framing. Vouchers are powerful. School vouchers. All of us good progressives talking about education, we don't use the term choice, we talk about vouchers. Guess what? Vouchers is a conservative metaphor. Technically, there's no such literal thing as a school voucher, right? Because it's a payment, right? But the school voucher, a voucher is something that you deserve, something you've earned, that you're entitled to. So every time you say school voucher, you're reinforcing the conservative idea of that.
I question that because it seems to me the conservatives are running away from the terms vouchers in favor of school choice, and because there's a negative association with vouchers too.
There could be, if you can, so voucher could be a concepted concept, so the progressives could turn the term voucher against the conservatives, but they don't. Conservatives continue to use choice because it's more powerful. But yet, voucher still, yes, you could, huh?
Vouchers don't poll though.
They poll less conservative. We could talk about polling as a huge, the way polling is done is a huge problem, right? When they poll on the issue of voucher versus choice, the only thing that poll is measuring is which is more conservative. It's not saying, it's progressives, when they poll on that, they're not using it to try to change discourse. They're trying to measure where what's less conservative. Choice is more conservative, which is why vouchers poll less popular than choice. So you're not measuring what's an effective messaging strategy. You're polling and measuring what is more conservative. There's a way to undermine that. There's a way to undermine that voucher frame, so that progressives could use it to undermine the conservative view. Right. There's a way to do that.
So I got a question.
Yeah.
I might be ahead of you.
I hope so.
But I thought you said when you talk vouchers, people think of something they're entitled to,
Yes.
yet an entitlement is bad.
Unless, well, here's, and we'll get to this, but you're ahead, but we might as well say no. The most important thing about a moral frame and is the preservation of the frame itself. So the way they've successfully framed that school voucher thing means that it's something that those families deserve because they are moral, because they're disciplined, and because it will support the conservative values. Meaning, no public education. So the most important thing is the preservation of the frame. So here's what conservatives know. They know that frames are necessary to communicate. They frame every time. They know how to communicate outside issue silos. This is really important because does anybody here work with environmental groups? I work with environmental groups and they're terrible at this. Because, well, think about it. You have the Great Lakes people. You have the river people, riverkeeper people. You have the lower Wisconsin waterways people. You have the trout people, the white-tailed deer people. You have the anti-sand mine people. You have the anti-iron mine people. You have the CAFOs people, right?
Mountain top removal.
And they all do different things on different issues. They use different language. And they only talk about their issue. What does that do? It weakens us. You know, the education people don't talk to the environment people, with all due respect. The labor people haven't historically communicated with other progressive groups. Sometimes education, because the two, you have the public sector unions with education, and you have private sector unions and you have public sector unions. Silos. This is really important, and you probably understand this from experience, but you never said it this way. If the facts don't reflect the frame a person believes, they reject the facts to keep the frame. Right? There's a reason for that, and it's exactly what you're talking about. It is the sustainability of the frame itself.
Are you going to give an example of how the conservatives speak outside the silos?
Hell yes.
Oh, because I don't buy anything.
This is why people voted for Scott Walker.
Yep.
They're looking for a moral connection. Did Mary Burke give people a moral connection? See, and now that the campaign is over, I can go against my promise to not publicly criticize her campaign. But did she make a moral connection with people? No. Let me get through this slide here. Just like making that path through the woods, repetition, repetition, repetition embeds frames into the brain. It's physically there. Okay, question.
I was just going to say, I really expected during the whole process of the campaign and in the final week it would be, Scott's a nice guy, he's done some things, but you just can't trust the guy.
It would have been too late.
Trustworthy.
It would have been too late. I'm helping a certain mayoral candidate right now, and he started very early, and I said, you have to, even before he declared, and I said, you have to start very early. You have to frame yourself, you have to set the frame for the campaign right now before your opponent does, because he who sets the frame first sets the frame.
So that's always true, you should
Always
do
true.
that first.
The very first.
Don't count on anything.
No. And there's no magic bullet.
Okay.
which is why bumper stickers always work.
So this ties into the Adolf Hitler ideology of repeat the lie and repeat the lie often, and then they will believe it.
Absolutely.
Just
Oh.
one example of people rejecting the facts that fit the frame, it's about candidates. If you like a candidate and you decide you like for that office holder, and you find out, or people tell you, yeah, but he doesn't agree with you on the minimum wage or immigration or whatever, they will reject those facts and say, oh, of course he must agree with me. They'll decide that the person they like agree with them on the issues, even if they factually don't.
Most importantly, what happens unconsciously is people say he knows best, or she knows best.
To welcome everybody this evening and thank you all for coming out to this presentation, discussion with Dr. Robert Craig on the subject of where do we go from here. This is being hosted by Grassroots Waukesha County, that there is plenty sympathy and plenty of energy in people for progressive change, even in a place like Waukesha County. So, without any further ado, I'd like everyone to give me a warm welcome to Dr. Robert Craig.
Thank you, Mike. And it is just great to see all you progressives here in Waukesha. What we see right now is a real disconnect between our values, the way we think our society should be and what it could be, what is within our power to achieve, and the reality. And not just the reality, but the direction of things, with things like poverty and race-based economic and social disparities getting worse, not better. Now, the problem is that cynicism is our biggest foe. You see, we're the ones who believe, progressives are the ones who believe that our great experiment in democracy, I mean, that's what the United States gave to the world over 200 years ago, has great promise that we can achieve anything we want to achieve. The cynicism is cynicism about democracy itself. Conservatism right now, or the current version or variant of it that has gained control, actually believes that our government is the enemy, when our government is nothing but our own way of governing ourselves. It's our democracy.
The reality of the money in politics thing, the thing that you need to understand, is that it is now the reason why people don't vote. Money drives people out of the process. And this is such an important element of what we're talking about here. And the last thing that I'll really spend much time, then we'll do questions and your good statements and everything like that. But this is something you need to understand. It's why you got to fight this thing with everything you've got. Because we're talking about the problems of political parties. Those are real. We can talk about the problems of individual candidates. Those are real. But the systemic problem that ends up driving people away from the process is the money in politics. This is not about legalized bribery, as Russ Feingold refers to it correctly. It is that. There is pay to play. All that is real. But the deeper, more fundamental thing is that this money in politics, $12 billion, better part of $12 billion spent in the last presidential election, better part of 5, 6, maybe 7 billion just spent in these midterm elections. Overwhelmingly, that goes to buy negative ads. Those negative ads tell people not to vote. And they are more powerful than your knocking on a door. They are more powerful than your grassroots activism. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do the grassroots activism. It matters and it does get people there. But do you understand that you go to that door, you knock on that door, you talk to that person sincerely, and then they go back into their house, they turn on their radio, they turn on their television, and they are told hour after hour, day after day, that the people running for public office are evil, that they are in fact the devil incarnate. We had a race for Attorney General in Wisconsin, and on the night before the election I made the mistake of turning on the news. There wasn't any news about politics, don't worry. But they had the ads piled up right before. I'm not making this up. There was one ad from a group saying that Susan Happ was soft on child molesters. And then there was another ad right after it saying Brad Schimmel was soft on child molesters. And I thought to myself, if you're the alien that landed from another planet, what you would say is, I don't think this is a very appealing choice. And the fact of the matter is, you know, not everybody's a political junkie that comes out to Burke's Irish Castle on Friday night. There are a lot of people who get a lot of their information from those ads. And I want to put something in your head about how those ads work. No one in the commercial sector ever does what happens in the political sector with those ads. No one in the commercial sector would ever do that. And we always say, well, we want government to run like a business. No business would ever do what we do as regards politics in this country. Because we flood tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars into political campaigns. They buy ads on television, and those ads are overwhelmingly negative. In the race for the U.S. Senate in 2012 in Wisconsin, Tammy Baldwin versus that former governor, Tommy Thompson, over 90% of the ads were negative. In the final weeks, there were no positive ads running. All you got was negatives. Now, understand this. If this was the commercial sector, on Monday morning, Coca-Cola would put an ad on, and they would say, we regret to inform you, but there are reports of vermin and, I don't know, I was going to say rats. I think that's pretty rough. Let's just say, you know, creatures being found in the Pepsi vats. Right? And everybody's like, whoa, oh my gosh. And you know what they do? They'd have that little asterisk on it, just like they have on the ad down at the bottom. They tell you their source, right? And then, by that afternoon, Pepsi'd be up with an ad saying, we regret to have to tell you, in response to that vicious attack ad from Coca-Cola, that the truth is Coca-Cola is saying that because they have been found to have disease in their vats. They've got horrible diseases in their vats. Why, the next morning, Coke would be back saying, I'm sorry, all the gloves are off. Over at Pepsi, they're peeing in the vats. By that afternoon, what?
Ebola.
Yeah, Ebola next. By that afternoon, Roger Bybee suggests the Ebola ads would come up. I don't think they'd be up till Wednesday. But I swear by that afternoon, they would be saying, they'd be putting up the health reports. Pepsi, it rots your teeth out. It makes you fat. It's going to kill you. Coke, it rots your teeth double fast. It makes you super fat. It's going to kill you sooner. By the end of that week, not a single person would drink Pepsi or Coca-Cola. They would swear off it all. We'd all have better teeth. We wouldn't be as fat. We'd live a lot longer. And we wouldn't be drinking soda anymore. But here's the problem. That's what we do to our politics. We jam this money in. We flood it in. We give the most irresponsible people imaginable complete carte blanche to spend as much money as they want. They spend that money and they drive our turnout down. Do not miss this connection. We did the Citizens United ruling in 2010. We did the McCutcheon ruling just this year. In between, we did the Knox ruling that knocked down a lot of the rights of labor unions to be heard in the public sphere. Ruling after ruling from our Supreme Court. An activist Supreme Court knocking down the barriers to corporate money in politics, knocking down the controls on spending in our politics, decision after decision after decision, coming year after year after year in our lifetime, right now, happening as we speak. And what do we get in 2014? The lowest turnout election since 1942. The lowest turnout election since 1942 nationally. And you know, in 1942, they had a little thing called World War II interrupting the process. Do you understand what we have done in just 4 years in America. We have begun a process of driving our turnout downward, driving people away from the process. In California, record low turnout. In Texas, record low turnout. In New York, the lowest turnout since they started keeping records. Illinois, looking at record low turnout. Vermont, looking at record low turnout, so low that all the races were screwed up. They had results they didn't expect because so few people came to the polls. State after state after state, turnout going down. Wisconsin, we were the pinnacle of the nation. We may well have the best turnout in the country. But you understand why that is. We are a state that has been torn apart, that has been ripped apart, that has had the most intense politics of anywhere in the nation. And yet, we couldn't even get above 55, 56% of the vote. You meet two people on the street in Wisconsin, best in the country, one of them didn't vote. We have created a fully dysfunctional process, and it's going to get worse. And so we have to pivot off the petty electoral politics of the moment. Doesn't mean you don't do electoral politics, doesn't mean you don't worry about candidates and parties, but we have to make it our first priority to address the disease that is corrupting the whole of our democracy and that will result in such low turnout elections that the only people voting are the rich folks. Right? The people for whom it is a transaction. I go to vote because I need to get something back.
Here's the problem. When they run government poorly, take George Bush with Katrina being a classic example, it actually helps them. When Governor Walker privatizes the state's economic development, WEDEC, the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, and that's a disaster, it discredits government. And so what we need to do is we need to approach issues differently. We need to approach people where they live, what is emotional for them, what their concerns are, anxieties, and their hopes for the future for themselves and their families, and then show that certain issues or policies are the key to achieving that, and that we can achieve those things. That in fact it's un-American to say we can't dramatically reduce poverty in this country. So what I want to say to you is that we're in a situation where we have to get back to fundamental values. And the policy needs to stem from the values, okay?
So we won't waste time deconstructing bubbles. Instead, we'll make a bid for the intelligent. In a strong culture, group identity is defined by a national or tribal narrative. Ideas and stories which describe that group, their history, their place in the world. From that narrative, traditions and moral codes accumulate, which reinforce the identity. This is the glue that holds people together. In a dying culture, traditions and moral codes begin to break down. Cultural narratives begin to lose power or become points of division. Even its financial power has peaked, but most importantly, it has lost all sense of itself. A nation might survive an economic collapse or even a catastrophic war, but mix in an identity crisis, and this is a warehouse doused in gasoline, just waiting for a spark. Anyone who's been paying attention knows that that spark is already in midair. The death of a national identity leaves an emotional hole. Humans instinctually seek out replacements to fill that hole. Prophets of hate offer replacements. They invite the disillusioned to rally behind stories that make them feel good, assign blame, and impart a sense of belonging. In-group, out-group, defined on trivia. Unless countered by a unifying vision, identity fragmentation accelerates. Left unchecked, this story culminates in territorial conflict or ethnic cleansing.
At some point, we will have enough power that we will clear them from the streets forever. That which is degenerate in white countries will be removed.
Attempting to predict what comes next would be the wrong psychology. What comes next is up to you. The following message is for those who see the stakes, those who would make a conscious bid to shape the arc of history. You see the imperative for intelligent action. Fear is the first enemy. When frightened, our brains work much less efficiently. Rational thought shuts down. Decisions are reduced the fight, flight, or freeze. This phenomenon is even more dangerous in the context of a panicked crowd. Those who maintain calm in the midst of a crisis have the best chance of improving the outcome. Science has shown that deep breathing calms the mind measurably, so make this a discipline. Anytime you feel fear, take a deep breath, reset, bring the world back into focus. Now that we're calm, we can think about our situation rationally. What can we do? What steps could we take right now that would improve the outcome? Not just for ourselves, but for our children and the generations beyond. If you're hearing this message, there is still time. If it resonates, we have a chance. The root of the issue is beyond the political. We have a paradigm problem, a socioeconomic design flaw. A socioeconomic redesign will require a new train of thought, a paradigm for the next generation. Any idea worth holding must be worth testing. Belief must synchronize with logic and evidence, aka reality. The scientific method must be applied. Ideas spread most efficiently when they are simple, compact, and minimally bundled. As such, we're going to break this down into bite-sized pieces, modular components. Where does your food come from? How far did it travel from the field to your plate? How will your family and community feed themselves when the chain of distribution is disrupted? Who will you turn to when the system is down? If your answer is the government, you're gonna have a bad time.
You're gonna have a bad time.
Rebuilding local resilience is imperative. Change must begin at the community level. We must transition now towards local systems of production, exchange, and decision-making. We must maximize efficiency, reduce inputs, waste, and distance traveled. We must start with small, testable solutions that can be implemented right now without the sanction or assistance of those in power. To rebuild local resilience, we must converge, form coalitions and teams, get our local community involved. The transition towards local resilience and peaceful continuity presents complex challenges. Time and resources are limited. There will be unforeseen obstacles. To increase our chances of success, we must use the adaptive approach. We start by defining local resilience as an abstract goal, and we prioritize local production, exchange, and decision-making with the understanding that this level of cooperation is only possible in the context of peaceful continuity. We can map out a minimal starting point. Psychologically fragmented groups can be unified if the factions share a common goal, a struggle, or an existential threat. We can refer to this instinct as the cooperation principle. Building local resilience, improving social dynamics, and preventing wars of aggression can each serve as unifying goals. The key is to bring people together in the real world. This can start with something as simple as organizing a gathering, passing out flyers, or helping out on each other's land. Working together peacefully builds unity. If psychological unity is attained, identity follows. This variable must not be left to chance. Henry Tajfeld's work on intergroup discrimination demonstrated that identity can form around any idea or characteristic that attention is placed on. Even something as arbitrary as a coin toss can be used to divide a room. Within a very short period of time, the groups formed will begin to discriminate against the other side and favor members of their own group. Tajfel referred to this principle as the minimal group paradigm. If identity can form around any idea, then we must work to ensure that the idea is positive, a code which holds us to a high standard of integrity and conduct. These are the kinds of ideas that inspire positive action.